There is a house in Ohura that makes the map feel strange. Not because the house is magical, not because the town is abandoned, but because the price looks like it belongs to another country. In a country where ordinary homes can make ordinary people feel shut out, a small king country town can suddenly appear on a property website with numbers that seem almost impossible. A section for less than many used cars. A house around the low six figures. A street where the gap between the dream and the practical reality is not hidden in the fine print. It is built into the road, the river, the old railway, and the reason the town was put here in the first place. So the simple question is this: why are houses so cheap in Ohura? Ohura sits about 50 kilometers northwest of Taumarunui, in a valley beside the Waitefina stream, which feeds into the Ohura River system. It is not the New Zealand of airport billboards. It is inland, damp, folded country, with roads that make distance feel longer than the number on the map. If you look only at the listing, cheap can feel like a discovery. If you look at the town, cheap becomes a question. Because a house price is not only a price for timber, roof iron, bedrooms, and land, it is a price for employment nearby, for a doctor nearby, for a school roll that can keep a school open, for a road after heavy rain, for insurance, for tradespeople, for the chance to sell again when you need to leave. Ohura makes that very clear. The town did not begin as a bargain, it began as a working place. Before the railway and the mines, this valley already had Maori history. There were settlements around the Ohura and Wanganui River junctions. Tracks connected the Taranaki coast with inland Taumarunui. In the 1860s, Maori built flour mills in the area. European settlers arrived in the district around 1900, and more land was taken up after the two world wars. But the thing that made Ohura a town with shops, workers, and a pulse was coal. From the 1930s, coal mining underpinned the local economy. The Stratford to Okahukura Railway passed through the area, tying the town to a larger transport system. Coal, rail, farming, workers, families, shops, and services all made sense together. That is the part a cheap listing cannot show you. The price of an old house is sometimes the shadow of an old system. In 1961, Ohura reached a population peak of around 654. That was not huge by city standards, but for a rural mining town, it meant life. It meant customers. It meant children. It meant enough reason for services to exist. Then the system changed. The state coal mines closed in the early 1970s. Many businesses and community services closed too. The last mine on the Waitefina coalfield closed in 1990. A miners' hostel became Ohura Prison in 1972, and for a while that gave the town another employment base. But attracting staff was difficult, and the prison closed in 2005. So Ohura was not simply forgotten, its main reasons for existing were removed one by one. This is why a cheap house here is not the same thing as a cheap house in a growing suburb. In a city, an old house can sit inside a rising market because jobs, hospitals, schools, and buyers keep pushing value into the land. In a remote town that has lost its economic engine, the building can still be useful, but the market around it becomes thin. Thin markets behave differently. There may be only a few properties for sale. There may be only a few buyers who truly understand the place. Median price data may be too small to mean much. One sale can look dramatic, but it may be a section, a damaged building, a lifestyle block, or a property with a very specific story. That is what current listing data shows. As of July 2026, realestate.co.nz showed only a handful of Ohura residential listings, including one house at $100,000 and sections priced higher or lower depending on the site. The same source showed too little data for a reliable median sale price over the last 12 months. Recent sales ranged widely from very low section sales to ordinary rural or lifestyle prices. So the honest answer is not houses in Ohura are all cheap. The honest answer is, Ohura exposes how misleading the word cheap can be. A low entry price may be real, But it may sit beside repair costs, transport costs, service limits, flood risk, distance from work, and a resale market that is not liquid. Drive the story from the listing to the map, and the house changes shape. Taumarunui is the nearest larger service town. That is where many practical things become easier. Supermarkets, healthcare, trades, government services, and the kind of errands that city people do without planning. The distance is not impossible. People live with it. But it is not nothing. If a pipe bursts, if the roof needs work, if a car fails, if a family needs frequent medical appointments, the cheap house has started asking for more than its purchase price. And then there is water. In April 2026, Ohura was hit by flooding. Ruapehu District Council said around 50 homes suffered flood and silt damage, with 6 significantly damaged. The council was pumping out flooded septic tanks and extending transfer station hours for flood-damaged goods. That does not mean the whole town should be reduced to a flood headline. It does mean that risk is part of the price conversation. When people ask why a place is cheap, they often want a simple villain. Bad town, no jobs, too far away, too risky. But real towns are not that simple. Ohura has people who choose to live there. It has local memory. It has a school, a museum, Marai connections, old Main Street buildings, farmland around it, and the strange dignity of places that have survived being written off from outside. Cheap does not mean worthless. It means the market is pricing more than the house. It is pricing the lost coal economy. It is pricing the railway's reduced role. It is pricing the closure of the prison. It is pricing the fact that a town built for one era has to keep living in another. It is pricing the distance between a property dream and a daily routine. The midpoint of this story is that cheap houses are not always an opportunity hiding in plain sight. Sometimes they are a ledger. On one side of the ledger is a roof, land, quiet, history, and a chance to own something when ownership elsewhere feels impossible. On the other side is maintenance, weather, isolation, services, employment, and the risk that the next buyer may be hard to find. For the right person, that trade may be worth it. For the wrong person, the cheap house may become expensive very quickly. That is why Ohura is a stronger story than a property shock headline. The houses are not cheap because the town has no value. They are cheap because the value is complicated. The old coal town still sits in the valley. The road still bends in. The old economic machine is mostly gone. The river is still there. The people are still there. And the listings, when they appear, are not just selling buildings. They are selling a choice. To buy in Ohura is not only to buy a low price. It is to buy into the history that made the town, the closures that changed it, the distance that shapes it, and the practical systems that still decide whether life there feels peaceful or hard. That is the quiet truth behind cheap houses in New Zealand. The number at the top of the listing is only the beginning. The real price is the place. And if you want to understand that price properly, you have to slow the story down. Because the cheap house version of Ohura is usually told too quickly. A person sees a listing, compares it with Auckland or Wellington, and the town becomes a punchline before it has been allowed to become a place. The first thing to notice is the scale. Ohura is small, and in a small settlement, every building carries more weight. A closed shop can mean fewer customers, fewer trades, fewer errands, and fewer reasons for a busier economy to return. That is why the property market can look so odd from outside. In a city, even a tired house is often plugged into a giant machine. There are many buyers, jobs, builders, banks, and people willing to speculate that the suburb will keep rising. The city around it keeps giving the land another argument for value. Ohura does not have that kind of machine around it. It has a different machine, older, smaller, and partly dismantled. It is not empty and it is not finished, but the original bargain has changed. 100 years ago, a worker might accept remoteness because the work was there. The distance was part of the deal, but the town gave something back: employment, neighbors, a local economy, and a social world where the place made sense. Today, a buyer may accept the low purchase price, but the work, services, specialist help, and trades may be somewhere else. The buyer may need to bring income with them, work remotely, retire, farm, run a small local business, or accept a narrower set of options. That is not a moral failure, it is logistics. And logistics are what cheap house videos often skip. The listing price is visible, the fuel cost is not. The roof is visible, the distance to a builder is not. The number of bedrooms is visible. Broadband, insurance, drainage, flood exposure, heating, maintenance, and resale are not always visible until later. In Ohura, those hidden things are the real story. Look at the old Main Street and you can read the town in layers: railway, coal, rural services, mine closures, prison years, and now the strange moment when outsiders notice the place again through housing prices. But a remote town is not an answer by itself. It is a trade. For some people, that trade is exactly what they want. Quiet matters. Land matters. Being away from the speed and cost of a city matters. For someone else, the same town may become difficult quickly. The better question is not, why would anyone live here? People do live here. The better question is, what must be true in your life for this place to work? If your income depends on a city job, the road matters. If your health depends on regular appointments, distance matters. If your house needs urgent work, trades matter. If you plan to sell later, the next buyer matters. That is why a low price can be dangerous when it is treated as the whole truth. In a place like Ohura, the purchase may be the easiest part to understand. The harder part is the life that follows. This is also why the recent flood matters, but should not dominate the script. Flooding is not the whole identity of Ohura. But the April 2026 flood is a reminder that the land is not passive. When the council says around 50 homes had flood and silt damage, that touches septic tanks, cleanup costs, insurance questions, and the ordinary difficulty of recovery in a small place. For a buyer, that does not automatically mean do not buy. It means do not buy blind. Ask what happened to the specific property. The same is true of the history. Ohura's coal story explains why the houses are there, why the town had a stronger shape in the past, and why the loss of mining and later the prison mattered so much. That is the sadness under the bargain, and also the possibility. A town without its old engine is not automatically dead. It may become smaller, quieter, more fragile, but still meaningful to people who accept the distance and understand the trade. So when the title asks why houses are so cheap in this New Zealand town, the answer has to stay layered. They can be cheap because the town is remote. They can be cheap because the employment base changed. They can be cheap because the market is thin. They can be cheap because services are limited. They can be cheap because some properties need work. They can be cheap because flood risk and repair risk are part of the calculation. And they can still be homes. That last point matters. A cheap house story can become cruel if it forgets that the houses are not just content. They are somebody's street, memory, family place, or attempt to begin again. Ohura deserves better than being used as a joke about bargain New Zealand. It is more useful as a lesson. It shows that affordability is not one thing. A house can be affordable to buy and expensive to maintain. A town can be peaceful and inconvenient. A listing can be accurate and still leave out the most important questions. That is why the final feeling should not be, do not go there. And it should not be, here is a secret bargain. The final feeling should be more careful than that. Ohura asks you to separate a cheap price from an easy life. It asks you to notice the systems behind a house. Work, water, roads, services, history, neighbors, repairs, and the future buyer you may one day need.
If those systems fit your life, the town may make sense. If they do not, the low price will not save you. That is the real value of looking at Ahura. It teaches the question every cheap listing should make you ask. Not just, can I afford to buy this? But, can I afford to live with everything this place is telling me?